Hello everyone, my name is Roberto Baggio Marak and I'm pursuing my Master's of Divinity on the New Testament in Shalom Bible Seminary, Sechü-Zubza. What I will be talking to you about is imputed righteousness based on the text 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 21. The biblical righteousness can be defined as the right standing with God without the sense of guilt, condemnation, and inferiority. The imputed righteousness is the righteousness of Jesus, credited to the Christian by his faith, enabling the Christian to be justified and is treated as if it is his. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 21 says, "For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him." Sin is evil, we all know this. Does that mean Jesus had become something that is evil? Absolutely not. The word sin here, the Greek word hamartia, has two meanings. Number one, it refers to sin, of course, something evil. But secondly, it also refers to sin offering. This is why in the Old Testament Septuagint Bible, the Greek word used for sin offering was just the word hamartia, which also means sin, but secondly, it also means sin offering. What this verse is trying to say is that Jesus had become our sin offering in the New Testament. In the Old Testament's sin offering, what a sinner would do is that bring an animal to the tabernacle, lay his hands over the animal, that his sins might be transferred to that animal. The animal would be sent off to the wilderness, and hence the sinner would be acquitted of his sin. The term imputation is the key word for the righteousness of the New Testament. The word imputation means to attribute, to ascribe, or to lay charge. Jesus was charged for my sins, so I can be ascribed for his righteousness. And Adam's sin was imputed to all mankind as per the fact that he was humanity's representative in the Garden of Eden, in the covenant that was made with him. But Jesus became the last or the second Adam in the New Testament, becoming our new representative in the new covenant. And his righteousness was imputed to us, while our sin was imputed to him. The doctrine of imputation can also be illustrated by the story of the two brothers, Jack and John. John was a perpetrator, whereas Jack was an innocent person, a good person. And one day, John was caught murdering a man in a street, in the dark street, and his clothes were stained with blood. The police could not recognize his face but his clothes, and so the police began to pursue him. John ran all the way home and told his brother everything that had happened to him, and that the police were after him right now and they would be home by any minute. So what did Jack do in compassion to his brother is that he took off his clothes and put it on his brother, while taking his brother's clothes and put it on himself, the one that was stained with blood. So when the police had arrived to their house, what did they do is take Jack instead of his brother, whereas John was the one that committed the crime, but he escaped the penalty of his own brother. Similarly, we the guilty has escaped in execution of the innocent Jesus Christ. He took our sin in exchange for his righteousness. The Son of God was treated like a criminal so that we the criminals could be treated like the sons of God. We have in fact become the sons of God in the New Testament. John chapter 1 verse 12. Today, according to the book of Colossians, we have become blameless because he has taken our blame. Now I want you to note the verse very carefully out here. It doesn't say that we might be considered righteous, but rather we might become the righteousness of God. The verse denotes transposition here, not consideration. Nevertheless, some of us Christians are still calling ourselves sinners saved by grace and redeemed sinners and so forth, condemning ourselves, whereas we had been justified by faith. Whereas in actuality, you are someone that used to be a sinner but has ceased to be one and has been turned into the righteousness of God by his grace. This is the reason why Paul multiple of times addressed the church as the saints, not sinners. Saints and sinners are to contrast out here. You cannot be a sinner and be a saint at the same time, nor can you be a saint and a sinner at the same time. The church was addressed as saints. Under the law, God demands righteousness from sinfully bankrupt men, but under grace, God has provided righteousness as a gift. Today, You are not righteous because of your goodness, but because of His goodness. You are not righteous because of your works, but because of His finished work. You are not righteous because of your deeds, but because of His sacrifice on the cross. The righteousness that we have today is not our own righteousness, but Jesus' righteousness imputed to us. So how righteous does God see you as when He looks at you? In His sight, you are 100% righteous. You are as much righteous as Jesus is in His perspective. Why? Because the righteousness imputed to you is His righteousness. But what if you sin? Does that make you become a sinner again? No. Just as good works does not make a sinner righteous, the mistakes you make does not reverse you back into a sinner. What do you think makes a sinner a sinner? Romans chapter 5 verse 19 gives us the answer. It's not a work of a sinner, it's the sinful nature passed on from Adam that makes somebody a sinner. It's Adam's work or his fault that makes an individual a sinner and not his work. In the same way, just as you could not undo the work of the first Adam, you cannot undo the work of the second Adam by your works anymore after you have become a Christian. So just as your work cannot make you righteous, your work cannot alter your standing with God. Hence, imputed righteousness is immeasurable, meaning we can grow spiritually, but we cannot decrease or increase in righteousness by our works. Your deeds cannot make you more or less righteous. God does not grade on the curve. There are no such thing as minor sin or major sin in the sight of God. Conversely, it is the same when it comes to righteousness. Hence, no Christian is righteous than the other. Christianity is not a performance-based religion. Christianity is not a stage of competition, but rather it's the acceptance of Christ's righteousness by faith. Self-righteousness, therefore, transpires to be hypocritical in the New Testament. Many of you watching me right now might have been born again 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and so forth. Nevertheless, if there was a drunkard or a murderer born again this morning, he would become as much righteous as you after his new birth, because imputed righteousness is immeasurable. Nevertheless, most Christians does not seem to understand their standing with God today. Many of us are still condemning ourselves in various forms. Christians are still trying to be who they already were. Consequently, they're still trying to be righteous when they were already righteous. All they had to do was walk in this righteousness that was already imputed to them. Change your perception. Why? The way you see yourself determines the way you live. Your right living must be a manifestation from your right standing with God. Otherwise, it will only be a religious morality maintained by self-effort. Thank you.